we get it. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. So I'm going to quickly share my screen and then take it from there. So I'm going to share, hope the right thing, and share it. Nope, I went for the wrong thing. Oops, this is what I want to share. And I'm going to do this in slideshow. All right, so do you all see my slide at this point? Is it coming through?
Yes.
All right, so great. So first of all, we are here within the optics organization, so Organization for Physics at Two-Year Colleges. And we are this little group, the PER facilitation group here. So if you're not familiar with the project, I would recommend that you look it up. There's a lot of things going on at the same time here. And so within the PER, there are these three acolytes here. So if you look for anybody to blame, these are the people you want to take names. So what are we here for? So our mission is to strengthen physics education research knowledge and engagement within the TYC community and to promote and support work collaborations. So we have multiple ideas in mind here. And we've been organizing these virtual events. And so this was the second iteration of the journal club meeting. And so we're going to have another one in December. And then in the spring, we have other activities that are planned, and you will hear about them fairly soon once we have finalized the program. And so just to quickly announce that on December 2nd, Sherry will talk about group roles in unstructured labs show inequitable gender divide. That would be an interesting topic to discuss within the context of PER. So this will be the third for this semester. And then, as I said, we'll have new things beginning in the spring, okay? So for today, this is the paper that we chose. And I'm assuming you've already seen it. If not, you can always link to it here. And so increased learning in a college physics course with timely use of short multimedia summaries. So the authors are, as you can see, from Columbia and Harvard. And so let me quickly go through a few things here. So I would like to maybe begin by why did we pick this particular paper and what's so interesting about it. So for one thing, it's easily accessible and it's very recent. It was published in January of 2022. So that makes it very current. It's also a very good example of what I would refer to as classroom level PER. That is, there are multiple things that PER usually does. One was something we talked about last week, last meeting, which was a broader perspective on who publishes in PER, where authors come from, and especially the contribution of TYC authors. Then there are other issues that are more oriented towards the social dimensions of physics teaching. And then there are the maybe more traditional aspects of things which are focusing on student learning within the classroom and how to organize curriculum around those things. And this is a good example of that. And of course, it's dealing with something that we're all concerned about, which is increased student learning. So that's a good important thing to focus on. And also the multimedia dimension of it. So, we are in an age where the video is becoming a very significant part of what we do in the classroom. And so how do we leverage that to, improve our in-classroom instruction and increase student learning is something that we should always consider. So let me quickly go over the summary of the paper and broken down this way. So first, the context. So this is a very large course at Harvard, calculus-based, taken by mostly pre-med or life sciences. It's a 2-semester course sequence, and so this would be the second semester. They typically have somewhere around 200 students or so per semester. And from the paper, it says that they have these interactive lectures twice a week, 90-minute sessions, and they do small group work and they have instructive feedback while in the classroom. And then they have the 1-hour discussion. My impression is it was only once a week. I couldn't find the precise information about that, but I understand it this way. And then they also have weekly homework. So all of these things are more or less structured the same way. So the discussion section is meant to reinforce the pedagogy that's used in the lectures, and then the homework is a follow-up to that, okay? Now, they've been using these, so they've put together these 1-minute video a few years ago, so before they actually conducted the study. And apparently the 1-minute video that's there's a name for it. The video themselves are like 1 to 2 minutes. They seem to be very popular with the students, and so they decided to measure the impact of these modules or videos on the learning of students. Okay, so specifically, they wanted to measure the impact of the post-lecture 1-minute videos and short text summaries on two things: problem-solving skills and the ability to chunk and organize information into a useful mental framework. I lifted that directly from the paper. Those were the aims of the study. So the study was done in week 9 of a 15-week semester, so roughly halfway through. And they invited all the students in that section, and out of 222, 148 students did participate. And it was all done in one 65-minute session, okay? And so during that 9th week of the semester. And they broke down the group in the students in 3 groups. So one group had, so they basically gave them, all the students got a set of annotated lectures and discussion notes from the discussion sections. And then they had addition to that. So one group received access to the 1-minute video for that specific topic they were interested in. It was optics. And then the other group, Group B, got the 1-minute video plus some short text summaries of what the topic was. And then Group C, which was kind of the control group, didn't receive anything. So they just had no additional study material for this session. And so the way the intervention, the whole operation worked is the following. So for 20 minutes, they asked the students to review whatever material they had available. So whether it was just a video plus the notes from the lectures, or the videos plus a summary text, or just the lecture, the lecture notes and discussion notes. So that went on for 20 minutes. And then for 7 minutes, they give them instruction on how to put together a concept map. And they use specifically for this one, an example from Newton's second law to show students how to organize a concept map. And then following that, they gave the students 18 minutes to complete their own concept map for this particular study, which was optical lenses or thin lenses. And so that's one element of the evaluation of the learning. And then the other element was a 20-minute session on a test of learning. So they had a survey, and they did this the test of learning for the 20 minutes that followed that. And so to quickly look at the results, they found the following. So they compared two things: the score on the concept maps. They had the concept maps evaluated by separate reviewers just to assess the quality of the concept maps. And they found the following. So, and then the other, sorry, before I go on to the discussion of that, they also had the score on this test of learning of the students, okay? And so on the concept maps, they found that groups A and B, so group A would be the one that had the lecture notes plus the video, and group B had that plus a summary text. So no significant difference between the two groups, but they seem to be better than the group C, which only had the lecture and discussion note to review from. So they used that to create a concept map. And so it seems like group A and B did better on that count. And then for the test of learning, the students had also different achievements. And here, there's a slight edge for group B, that the one that had the 1-minute video and a summary of the text, in addition to the lecture notes and discussion notes. And then group C, the one that only had the discussion notes, was a little lower in terms of score here. And so the conclusion from that, is that there seemed to be a significant improvement that comes from the 1-minute video, because both groups A and B received that. There is a slight difference between groups A and B. So group B received the videos plus a summary text. So it looks like the summary had a little extra effect, although not so much on the concept maps. From the data that we see here, the two groups had equivalent scores on the concept maps here. Okay, and so the claim from the paper is they think there are 3 factors that can explain what's going on here. So one of them is that by the intervention, that is the videos that they provided the students and also the summary, help the students chunk and organize the information and reduce, therefore, the cognitive load. That is the amount of thinking that the students had to kind of organize all the information that they were receiving from the lectures. And then also the use of contrasting cases will help solidify the information that the students got from the lectures. And in addition, they think that the use of an expert tutor to organize those videos and also the summary text will somebody who would be familiar with the common difficulties that students experience in the courses was probably a reason for this improvement. So specifically here, in talking about the chunking and organization of the information, they were to say that the material was designed to be used after the lecture. So the format was that the students would go to lecture, and from the description, the lecturers would be overwhelming the students, and so the students would need some help in kind of contextualizing and organizing all this information that they received from the lecture. And so this activity would help them organize this. And also from the survey of the students seems to have used these videos somewhere between the lectures, so right after the lectures, and before they attempted the homework that went along with this particular topic. So that's for the chunking of the material. And then for the contrasting cases, they think that when students, after the lectures, when students are presented with different cases that contrast the situations, it helps the students solidify their understanding of the material. And that's really based on prior research. So there's some references in the paper about prior research that had shown that. And then they also believe that this may have helped the student transfer what they have learned from these different examples to the task that they had to complete for the assessment, as well as for the concept map. So that's what they think happened with the contrasting cases. And then the third aspect of this was that they make a distinction between the person providing the instruction, the instructor, and the tutor. There would be somebody who would be helping students understand or learn about this material. And so they think that in the early versions of their 1-minute videos, the instructors did not have sufficient knowledge of the students' the common difficulties with the material. And they believed that these tutors were mostly former students or teaching assistants, had a better understanding of this, and that they would be, in a way, complementing what the instructors were doing. So the instructors will be content experts, but may not be so familiar with what the students are, finding difficult about the material. So that's where the tutors will be helping. And so by designing their activities with the help of these tutors, they think that that has improved it and made it more beneficial for the students. And then, so a few things that they observe in the discussion of their results is that the 3 factors that are listed may not be totally independent of each other. And so they may reinforce each other. So they don't want to claim that each one is separately impacting the outcome. And but they also think that the collaboration between the expert instructor and the expert tutor that collaboration is essential for the success of this activity. And then, so from that, they extracted a series of references. And so they think that for anyone who wants to do something similar, that they would recommend that the video activities would be focused on chunking, just to help the students organize this material, and that they would have to be designed so that the students can use that material just when they need it, which would be right after the lectures, and at least in the way they describe it. They also recommend that these videos be short. So here they focus on 1 to 2 minutes, and that's. They also want to make sure that it doesn't really add too much to the time load for the students. That they also, be familiar with what the student thinking is. That is, what kind of difficulties students have with the material. So that's where the tutors and experts would be helpful with the teaching assistant. And then also kind of trim down the presentation so there are not too many unnecessary elements in the presentation, and also use these contrasting cases, which should be built into the activity, not something that you would add after the activity has already been designed. So they think those would be useful recommendations. Okay, so and then they finish by saying that what they're planning on doing in the future is to see what impact this would have on homework and also on exams and long-term retention of the material. So this is not something that they have done for this study. So this study, as I mentioned, was a 65-minute intervention, and they just looked at a few things. And so they don't know yet how much impact this would have on homework, exams, and long-term retention. Okay, so that was basically what the paper was. I did a quick summary, but I think I hopefully got the main point of that. And then, so following that, so many of you had the chance to look at the paper on Perusall. So that was another element of this journal club meeting for today, was to maybe initiate that option to see how well this would work for us in the future. So those of you who had a chance to look at it made some comments. And so what I did here is I gathered some of those comments and try to organize them by themes. So one important question that came up at the very beginning was whether this would be, in a sense, providing a crutch for the students and prevent them from doing the primary reading that they should be doing. Other comments would be, something about the identity that the students develop in the course. Also, some people commented on the fact that there is an overwhelming amount of material in the course. I'm just going to go quickly through the theme, and I'll come back to these, and we can have a discussion about these things. So that was one grouping, and then the other one was about the observation that was made at the very beginning of the paper, which said that essentially the course was presenting a huge amount of information at a very high pace, and that's why these kind of interventions are helpful. And so one question could be, well, do we really need to do this? Maybe we should reconsider what we are covering and the way we are covering in those courses, and whether all that material would be absolutely necessary. And it's interesting that, in fact, a few days ago, I read another paper that came out of Stanford and talked about something very similar. They're redesigning one of their courses precisely along those lines to try to cut down some of the material and make it more accessible to the students. And then the other set of comments was about how to do this. So putting together a 1-minute video could be, pretty challenging sometimes, and because you have to really think about what are you going to put in there, and you don't have a lot of room to, to talk and comment, so it has to be very precise. And also, in terms of what the students actually learn, so there are a lot of open questions. Should we, consider the long-term retention and the impact? And the authors themselves say that they're going to look at that in the future. And so that would be something to consider here. And I think that, I'm sorry, this is where I put the comments about how to put this together. So how much work goes into organizing something like this, and whether we should use it as a preview material instead of post-lecture. And also maybe there are some summaries that are already available from publishers that go along with textbooks. Maybe we should use that. And so lots of questions about this, okay? And I think this was my last slide. So I'm gonna maybe come back here and start over here and maybe open a discussion if you had any questions, or if you want to jump on one of the comments that were made by the people who looked at this paper, or add to it, or whatever. So what do you think? Glenda, do we have any specific questions already in the chat? Do we have things?
We do not yet. I think people are eager to participate orally, probably.
Okay, that'd be great. So
the summary was very useful. Yes. Thank you, Karim. Very comprehensive, short and comprehensive, short and sweet.
Okay, so Jeff, go ahead. I see your hands raised.
Yeah, so I see that there's this question about providing materials to students, but then the students not using those materials. I found it helpful to use tools like we have this tool in Canvas. So so Canvas is the what do they call that, learning management system. So it's like that we use here, and it has this tool called Studio where you can take a video and you can set it up with questions that will pop up as you are watching the video. So the video is going along, and then it pauses and pops up the question for students to respond to. And while I'm not using that for grading purposes, a lot of the students think I am. And also I do look over those, and when I notice that a student is just not answering those questions, it's a clue to me that they're not watching the videos, and then I can drop them a note and just give them that little nudge. And so there are tools out there that can kind of help give you some insights, timely insights, as to whether or not students are using things, how they're using them, how successful they're being with them, to then do that, poke.
Yeah,
nudging.
Really happy to hear this, because I've been looking for something like this. I was looking at something called Posit, I think it's called, where you can create videos where you can embed questions within them, but it seemed to be an add-on that was a little difficult to integrate within Canvas, but I didn't know that Canvas had already this. The problem is that sometimes, the options on Canvas are not available in every iteration of Canvas. I have to dig in our local implementation of Canvas and find out more about this, but I'm glad you pointed out. Yeah. So anybody else wants to have something to say about all of this? So what do you think about the issue of, does this help or hurt if we provide these summaries? Was that such a bad idea, or should the student be responsible for making those summaries, or would it be helpful to actually provide them with that? What you're thinking about that?
I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah, I think providing a summary really helps. I do it occasionally when I'm starting a lecture, kind of telling them where we've been, just to give context and things like that. But I feel like if I had time and I did those 1-minute summaries, that would be fantastic. But it's just the lack of time. What I have right now is the lectures that I did during pandemic times when we did all those Zoom lectures. I just kept them there for 2 semesters. And so occasionally my students unprompted might go in and say, oh, we're doing Newton's laws. Let me go see what Tony was doing then. And some of them have been helpful to the students, but I mean, it seems like they would require some editing. And if I could just get those down to 2-minute segments, I think they would be really helpful.
All right, Jason, I see your hands up. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I really like the idea of this. And I think it goes along with kind of the common way that I've been taught to present something, is you tell people what you're going to tell them, and then you go in and you do the detail of telling them, and then at the end you summarize what you just told them. And so having these little videos either before and or after sounds wonderful. One of the questions that I have is whether it's important that the summaries be made locally, or if there are summaries that have been made that are really good. And this paper indicates, that the quality of the summary matters, whether it's something that we can share with each other and then not lose their effectiveness.
Yeah, I don't know if there is such a thing, but maybe that could be a good starting point for some sort of collaboration here, where we could team up and put together our efforts into something like this. John, yeah, go ahead. See your hand up.
I'm curious as to how this might transfer over. Can see how it could be very useful in the situation where it was applied, where I believe it was a 65-minute lecture. But a lot of us teach in a very active method where we chunk the material already and then have students do activities. And so it'd be interesting to see if it carries over.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things I was curious about it, because they did mention that the course was already organized along the active learning principles. And so it seemed to me, so then they kept referring to lectures. And so I was wondering what exactly is a lecture in that context. So because they do break it down and so on. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's, there might be some overlap going on there. So I don't know.
Yeah, our chunks here are either 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on whether the class meets 3 times a week or twice a week.
Yes, we do that too. Yeah. Another thing I was kind of a little surprised by, and that is the sort of divide that they seem to imply between the instructor and the tutor or expert tutor. I was always under the impression, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I have the impression that at least in the TYC context, we do know what the student difficulties are. I don't know about what you guys feel about, how you feel about that, but I have the impression that the closeness of our interaction with the students actually helps us really know, or maybe not totally, but at least have a good idea of what sort of things the students are, having difficulties with and what they could use. Or so, what do you think about that?
I was going to say kind of along the lines of what was being said earlier. They say they use active learning, but then they keep referring to lecture. And so, like, again, if you're actually doing a lot of active learning, you'll usually have a pretty good idea where the hangups are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was going to chime in that might be kind of an artifact of the environment that they're in, right? They're teaching in an environment where they've got 200 students, and so even when you're putting your students in groups to be working in an environment that big, you're just not getting to every group as you walk around and monitor and give suggestions and stuff, and so that might be part of it as well.
So could it be then that this is a theme that I think came up last time we were discussing this? Some of the issues that are identified by PER in the context of a large university and the kind of problems they try to address in that situation may not be such a huge problem for our environments, where we usually have smaller classrooms and the one person does everything. So we don't have, I don't know about you, but I don't have any assistant. I'm the only one doing the lab, the lecture, whatever needs to be done. I'm it. That's it. The students only know one person. So does that make things easier, more difficult for this kind of study analysis? It seems to me to change the context quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was also struck by the population. Life science and pre-med students don't take calculus-based physics here. They take the algebra trig level. I don't know if that's true everywhere.
It's true for our campus, yeah. In Florida, it is. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I read about that.
They do.
Harvard
in California.
They do what? They calculus-based or algebra?
Yeah, they do calculus-based, but I mean, the colleague that I'm teaching with, who's been teaching longer than me, just technically says that at least because they have calculus, you can show where things come from. But I kind of feel like if it's a calculus-based class, there has to be a little bit of calculus in it. But I mean, the pre-med and pre-biology here in most of the colleges in Southern California do have calculus-based physics. It's just different content.
So what about that notion that the courses are heavily loaded with material, and that generates some? I mean, they kept referring to the students being overwhelmed by the lectures. Not sure that's a good thing. Could we maybe lower the load and not overwhelm the students? Is it really that important that we cover so much material? Because it seemed to be kind of fundamental that every course covers all these different chapters, and I was wondering.
I need to.
I have lots of opinions about that. So,
well, let's hear some of those.
I mean, I'm teaching in a different context than I was, and I think I've always felt like, I mean, from the TYC influence a lot, not to be covering as much material, obscuring anyway. So I don't really think in terms of, we got all this content that we have to cover, even though it's in the course outline of record. I am not going to cover everything. But I still feel in the context that I'm teaching, which is a 1 hour, 25-minute lecture, on Tuesday and Thursday or Wednesday and Monday, that my students still have that overwhelmed look, you know. I feel like they have more of it than the ones I used to teach in North Dakota, because I had like maybe 4 hours, which was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, as opposed to just Monday and Wednesday. And so I feel like Monday and Wednesday and then a lab, I just get that sense that they feel a little more overwhelmed. In fact, when I was lecturing yesterday, I was like, hey, do you guys need a breather? Because it's you have a break in between, but it's not even sufficient to kind of give them a breather. And I'm like, even I was thinking about chunking the material. I was teaching fluids, and this is one question I was going to ask you guys. So I'm doing buoyancy, and I'm doing the YouTube, you know, the fluids in the YouTube. And I'm even in my mind wondering, do these students really need this YouTube thing? And I was like, okay, this is the real YouTube. But I'm like, so in terms of chunking, I'm like, okay, I can talk about hydrostatic equation and then move to buoyancy. But I was wanting to do the YouTube, and I was like, oh, the students probably can't handle this right now because it's going to be a lot. I'm going to be trying to tell them, hey, the pressure here is the same as the pressure here and all that. So I went to buoyancy, which we had done in the lab. But one of my questions was, do they really need the YouTube? But so, yeah, I feel it more in this current situation that I need to be, I would benefit from having that 1 minute video in this scenario, because I don't see the students as often.
I think, and one of the things I would like our community to think about, like just overall in terms of college physics, is wait, what is the point of our courses, right? Like, it seems to me that these textbooks got written because it had to include everything, and over decades, it's just become that you have to cover everything in the textbook as the cultural norm. But covering doesn't mean that students are learning anything. And so would it not be better for the students to learn a few key things that they can then apply in multiple ways, rather than getting exposed to a ginormous encyclopedia of ideas and not retaining any of it and not having any sense of how it connects together, which is how I think a lot of intro physics courses are to our students, right? They're like, oh, well, there were 3,000 equations, and that's their concept of the course. And I think that's a shame, because that's not what physics is. But
I think a lot of these summaries, they were used by the students to just prepare, refresh them for the homework assignment. And so it was very directed and a short-term thing to prepare. They were using a lot just before they did those homework assignments. It was very narrow-minded in a sense. Jeff said something that maybe goes a little bit contrasting with what John said, right, Jeff? You would say that active learning, actually, because the student goes so deep, maybe sometimes loses the broad view, the bird's eye view of what's happening in a summary may be more useful, in your opinion?
Which comment of mine are you referring to? I've had so many ideas.
Yeah, students in active learning class are working harder in class than
yeah.
so I suspect they're feeling more overwhelmed at the end of the class.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about that issue of them feeling overwhelmed. And, I see this with my classes where, my lecture, quote unquote, is really me just when I'm lecturing, I'm just asking them questions. And then, eventually I'm just like, okay, y'all ask each other the questions, go. And, my students are leaving my class looking exhausted, right? Because they have been working really, really hard. And it's, that the feeling of overwhelmed, that's what that's a sign that you are thinking and trying to put pieces together. And so, you know, people leave passive lectures not feeling overwhelmed because, well, they weren't doing anything. And it's only later when they're actually sitting down to try to do something like the homework that they go, oh, I don't actually understand this. And so at least that's what I suspect is happening.
So we have to have a different understanding of the word overwhelmed here then, I guess. It's overwhelmed in the sense of exhausted by having done so much versus just having received so much information that you don't know what to do with it anymore. Or I have the impression that's could be the feeling of overwhelmed. That's the way I understood it anyway.
Oh, yeah, like that overwhelmed is this ambiguous term that they're using in the paper, right?
Yeah.
They didn't define it well. What do they mean by that?
Okay. I had another question about the same the study. It seemed to me, you know, doing everything like this in a 65-minute setting, so you get 20 minutes of this, 7 minutes of this, 18 minutes of this. Is that realistic? I mean, I don't know. I have the impression it's a little contrived as far as the study and how much conclusion you can draw from that. I don't know. What's your feeling about that, Jeff? Yeah.
I mean, I think that they did that because they've already been using these videos. These are already a resource that they've been using with their classes. And they mentioned later on that after doing the study session, they released the videos to all students in the class.
Right.
And so, you know, this was sort of a way to try to be able to do a study in, you know, as isolated as they could get when they already are when they're trying to study a tool that they are already using in their classes. And they also, you know, and they also had that discussion of how they did this on a particular topic that they identified as being conceptually rather isolated from a lot of other topics. So I think that this was just their best attempt at trying to do some isolation and be able to have control groups.
John?
Yeah, this was, as I was reading through this one, I was certainly taken back to the discussion that we had last month, because I think that almost certainly the students that were in this study have a much deeper, probably prior physics and math background than the students that we typically see. I don't know that they have as much outside of school stuff going on as our students do. And so I found myself wondering how many of my students would take the time to watch the 1 to 2 minute videos. And I feel like if I were going to try to do the same thing as hit the same amount of content as they're hitting here with the summaries, I'd need to do 2 or 3 of those for each of my classes because of the way the class is situated. So I think it could be different. I don't know that it is different.
Jason?
I just had some ideas swirling around in my head. At my school, we're using a combined lecture lab. So we have 2 3-hour sessions, either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah,
and so if it's a new topic that we're doing and I spend, you know, the majority of the class on a new topic, I think a 1-minute video would be not realistic to try to capture that. And then also, we're no longer doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes here. And so students always have a 5-day gap between, you know, Wednesday or Thursday and then the next week. And I was just wondering, maybe a good strategy could be that I make a 1-minute video that precedes the assignment. So when the student finally gets around to sitting down to start on the assignment, they go in, they're like, okay, well, what is this I'm supposed to do? And they see the video there and they click on that, and then they do the whatever it is that I've asked them to do. Maybe that would be a good place for it. Anyway, just had that thought.
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing for the past few semesters now, I was pushed into it mostly during the pandemic. I had started before, but so I create these things that I call tutorials, which include videos and some text and a few questions And I ask the students to get them done before we ever touch a subject in class. So when they come to class, they've already done that. They've already watched me explain a few things. And my videos there are a little bit longer than 2 minutes. They go to 5, 6, 7 minutes. And it could be 3 or 4 in the assignment. And then when they come to class, I usually do a short summary of a recap of what they've already heard in the tutorial. And then I'm using this tool from Pearson called Learning Callaghan. And I'm using it in class to have them work in groups on questions that I put together. And at that point, they get a group grade because they work in groups. And I go around and I help basically. I don't give them the answers, but I push them to get them done. And they seem to be going well with that. And so in a sense, I haven't had to expend a lot of time, going through any particular material because I offload that on Canvas. When they access it, I'm using a tool called SoftChalk. I don't know if anybody used it before, but it's pretty convenient for doing this. And so far, it seems to have been going well. In terms of learning, I'm pretty satisfied with how well they're doing on tests after that. And so maybe that's one of the ways is to get them to do something outside of class. So in class, they can go directly to working out problems or doing a lab if we have labs, stuff like that.
So Karim,
Anyway,
do you share your material with other faculty teaching the same course at your institution? Do you see a contrast for other classes being taught in a different style than yours at your institution?
We haven't done a real detailed study of that, to be honest with you. My only reference I have for this is when the registration opens up, my classes fill up pretty quickly. Usually for and it's not because of my schedule. I teach 8 in the morning classes, physics 2 with calc at 8 in the morning. People sign up for it anyway. I also teach at 5:30 at night and people sign up anyway. So in that sense, I can say maybe things are, I don't know if it's a really valid measure, but it seems to be okay. I mean, I have colleagues who are doing something different. I mean, we haven't really compared notes completely. Maybe that's one of the things we should do as a department. And
awesome. So in my institution, we're going to have a physics for life science, a 2-semester for the first time starting next year. Right now, we have our calculus base that's 3 semesters, and we feel pretty comfortable explaining everything, and there's enough time. So chunking out the information, I've been looking at the new Knight's book about physics for life science. Is a recent book by Pearson from Knight. And well, they have all those modules and the pre-lecture videos and conceptual tests, etc., and polls and etc. And during it's awesome. I've never used so many bells and whistles because I always try to go to free material for my students. But as I feel right now overwhelmed in creating all this by myself up front, I wonder if I'll probably adapt one of those and use that. I wonder if that's something I would want to do in the future for the other majors, actually, for the right calculus based.
Yeah,
they are calculus based for the engineering course.
Yeah, I think that to me it's like something that could really beg for a project here to try to put maybe 1 or 2 of these things together across different campuses, different institutions, and see if we can collaborate on something like this. As somebody said in the comments, a 1-minute video is pretty hard to do, but and to decide. I mean, it would be nice to have something we can say coming from TYCs as a collection, and then we can test them separately in our campuses, and we can see how effective they may be and how we can, that in long term, I think it would be something very useful to do. Because, the more I observe my students, and material that doesn't come from a video is becoming kind of something they don't want to look at them. And reading and a paper or a book or something like that is like a big challenge now. So you give them a video, they jump on any video that you give them. And in fact, that's how they study. They go on YouTube and they try to find something that matches whatever they have as an assignment, or they're studying for a test. And sometimes I think it's too much, but that's the way they are. That's the way they do things.
Yes, more than ever, students are requesting supporting material in the form of videos. So professor use the cheapest books. We open stocks in some of the cases. So is there more Khan Academy? Is there more other physics classroom videos? There are more that those are the things they want. That's what they're looking for. My colleagues in chemistry, though, who we normally use the expensive textbooks and make them students pay a lot, they tell us that the bells and whistles go underused. That's normally what they tell us, that they have all these things, alternative things for the students to watch, etc., but they are not being used. That's their feedback. I have to listen to it more recently, what they're saying.
Well, I don't know about how you guys feel about that. My impression is that especially post-pandemic, the ability to focus seems to be a big challenge for many of our students. And so having them do this and that and this and that and multiple things seems to be more of a challenge today than it was even, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, it was never perfect, but I have the impression that it's got worse pretty quickly because of all the things going on at the same time. So I don't know, am I the only, have you had similar observations about your own students? Because sometimes I wonder, are students in Florida different from the ones in California or in Nebraska or somewhere else? I mean, I don't think so, but I don't have any firsthand evidence for it. So that's why I always like to hear from other people what they.
Yeah, I don't think that they're different, and I don't think they're different community college to university, because I taught at the University of Oregon this past summer. Again, since we were post-pandemic, I taught there in the summer pre-pandemic. And I gave this, since I hadn't taught there in 3 summers because of the pandemic, I gave the same exams, and this group performed at least a letter grade worse on each exam than they did the ones before. So I don't know if it goes to preparation, if it goes to being distracted, because now there are many more things that they are focused on, but there is something there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could it be the pandemic that we're seeing the effects, more of those effects now? I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other aspects of this particular paper that you guys found kind of
Aaron had well, I think Krista answered Aaron about the parallel pedagogy, and Krista also had a mention why is the reason possibly the editor suggested this at the editor pick for the paper, right? This was an editor pick, and how we wish there was more research on TYCs, also applied to TYCs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Anybody has any guesses to the answer to that question?
I don't yet, but I did Google the PER editor suggestion, and Charles Henderson has something written there. So when I get time, I'm going to read this, because I'd love to be able to submit to PhysRev, assuming I could find funding, but that's a future problem. But what do they look for? And they don't have much from TYCs. So I just want to know what's important to them.
Krista, I actually had an email exchange with Charles Henderson, PR, and one of the things he wanted to know was how could we have more TYC representation in the publications. So this seems like a good conversation for us all to have.
Mm-hmm.
There is an awareness of administrators and leaders out there that there needs to be more TYC representation. So these leaders, they are aware of that, and they are trying to figure out how to do that. Is a question mark we all have.
Well, hopefully, as Kareem had suggested, maybe we could pool some resources, right? And that's one of the things we'd like to do with optics, is if a number of people are interested in sort of pursuing a specific question, a research question, we might be able to collate data, so at least we have a larger sample size than just one class. But that is something to think about and work on. But we are working with Physport, right? I mean,
Right.
Glenda and Kareem You talk more
Yes,
about that.
yes, we'll have next semester a few conversations, meetings like this on Physport. And we'll go over again on the topic of what are the tools available in Physport and how it can be used. We can upload data and have a common TYC database in the future as we share our collected anonymous TYC data, and that can be done. And we can see the results and compare with national average and select only TYC. So we'll have mini workshops on that.
Yeah, in fact, going back to the question of how we can get more PR and something like, TYCs rather, and something like PhysRev, I'm wondering if we could be clear that one of the things that TYCs can do very quickly is provide additional data, publish about findings from, conducting whatever survey or something, without necessarily projecting that forward in the sense of drawing conclusions about the implications of this, because sometimes we just have the data, and we can run the statistics maybe. Sometimes I look at some of those statistical tools. I don't have any enormous background in statistics, but I see some of the names of the kind of the instruments that they use. I'm wondering, whoa, I might need a whole semester of statistics to learn how to do any of these things. And maybe we can have, as a TYC community, is some kind of expert somewhere who can really help us with assistance with running this kind of statistics. How do you actually collect this kind of statistics? Is there any kind of tools or libraries we can use to run through the data, through the statistics? And if we can maybe get to the point where we're thinking that just publishing our data in the sense of, here's what I've done, I collected this data, these are the numbers that I've got, and this is it. I don't need to go, theoretically, what does it mean? What does it imply? Which is what I guess a researcher in PR would really want to do. And I guess this is level one, maybe, of research. But maybe that's an obstacle. That's why maybe people don't go too far. I say, well, what am I going to say? Just say, okay, I got this data, and that's it. It seems too shallow. And maybe there's a stigma attached to the idea that, well, you have to do a much deeper analysis, otherwise it's not worth publishing. And so, or I don't know,
Actually, Corinne, I think that this article, this came up in our conversation. It was a 65-minute intervention. It's one little tiny bit compared to how much you and I do, but they have a culture and they have people supporting their writing and data analyzing. So I'm in a research group with two people that are at R1 institutions. One's a data expert. We all have our expertise, and my expertise is my TYC connection mostly. But so the idea is, if you can find someone with the expertise you don't have, then there's some real leveraging potential, and it doesn't have to be as overwhelming.
And I think, one of the things for your established PER groups are really interested in is partnering with two-year colleges, because of that last paper that we discussed a month ago about the lack of diversity in the student population. Right. So I think we are in a good position right now as TYCs to try to leverage our place, right, with our really diverse and fairly general students, right? As a number of people have said, our students really aren't all that different from the four-year institutions, or at least the public ones. And that's been my experience. So anyways, I'll stop babbling.
Last 3 minutes.
Yeah.
If I may change directions a little bit, or maybe it will be the same direction. Is there anything particularly that you would like to see addressed by the TYC-PER interest group in future meetings?
Glenda, I think the thing I just posted is if anything that's probably relevant for this whole group, all of us, is thinking about math preparation. And I'm sure we all have plenty of students that come in, need to take a ton of classes beforehand. My dean shared with me this Inside Higher Ed article about how to try to get students up to pace with math. And there's a community college in Oregon that is doing some innovative things with co-requisites. So I shared some links in the chat regarding that. It's just a thought.
Yeah, that will resonate with everyone.
Elizabeth, do I see your hands up? Yeah, okay.
I don't want to derail because I know we're rounding up the thing, but I had one thing that interested me way back from when we were talking about the article, but I thought I'd just throw it out there before we all left. Is that okay? Or am I going to take us too far off? I was just thinking, because all of this was on like, this whole premise of this 1 minute video was to help students, was to like synthesize for the students, or to like, you know, kind of try and sort out the main points. It's like, but wouldn't it be valuable to try and have students review what just happened in the lecture and try and write that summary themselves, or try and write what they think the main ideas were, and that process itself would be valuable. And so it occurs to me is like, could we flip it and see if maybe we make that them creating it is a learning experience? I sometimes try and do something similar to that, but the visual to have is the time that, like you said, when you're supposed to chunk through an amount of stuff, there's only so much, and there's only so much to crunch around and still hope that your class transfers to whatever university your students typically transfer from. Our TYCs too, right? So there's always that edge of it. We're not in total control over what we're doing in our classrooms in that sense, but I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good exercise for them, because sometimes I allow my students to bring a sheet of notes for the test, and sometimes I look at what they put on it, and it's like 3 or 4 lines, and I say, that's it. That's all you have from everything we discussed. And I see some, you know, some of it is relevant, some of it not so relevant. And so the ability to, you know, grasp exactly what's really important seemed to be a skill that they really need help with, I think. And yeah, what you said about writing your own summary of the lecture would be a good exercise for them. Glenda, I see you wanted to say something there.
I'm good. We
sorry.
are at 4 o'clock right now. I'm the clock person. Thank you very much, everyone. Unless there's any other comment you would like to say right now, we are. Oh, Tom McCormick is just joining us now.
Oh.
But thank you very much for your participation. Yeah.
Well, thanks all for coming.
Thank you very much,
everyone.
Stop sharing at this point, and
thank you very much, everyone. Hello, Tom. Welcome. We are going to stop recording at this point. It's 4 o'clock.